There are places in this world where history died badly, not
The enemy
peacefully in
approaches.
its
Are you
sleep,
ready?
surrounded by
I am.
loved
We
ones,
stand
but
This journey is
violently,
endless.
screaming.
We must press
the kind
on.
of death
The
that
ruins
leaves
hold our...
stains that don't wash out even after centuries of rain. The ruins of Stonebridge were one of those places. Once this had been the most magnificent crossing in the borderlands, a masterwork of ancient engineering where orc stonework met human architecture in a rare moment of cooperation. 400 years ago, someone had decided that enemies could build something together, something that would outlast their hatred. They were wrong. The bridge had lasted exactly 38 years before the first border war turned it into a graveyard. Now, all that remained were broken pillars reaching toward the sky like accusing fingers, half-collapsed arches that led nowhere, and stones that had seen so much blood they turned a permanent rust brown that no amount of weathering could fade. This was where Kara came to cry. Not because she enjoyed the irony of mourning her life in a place where thousands had mourned theirs, but because no one else came here. Not orcs who saw the ruins as a reminder of weakness of the 38 years when their ancestors forgot that cooperation with humans always ended in betrayal. Not humans who whispered that the souls of the fallen still walk these stones at night looking for the enemies who'd killed them, perfect for someone who belonged to neither world anymore. Kara sat on what had once been the bridge's central arch, now reduced to a platform of crumbled stone, barely 15 feet above the dried riverbed below. Her back against a pillar that had somehow refused to fall, despite having more cracks than solid stone. Her legs dangling over the edge in a way that would have horrified her old combat instructors. Never sit with your back exposed, never let your legs dangle where they could be grabbed, never put yourself in a position where you couldn't fight or flee in under 2 seconds. But that was the thing about being exiled. All those survival rules assumed you wanted to survive. The broken war braid sat in her lap, 12 inches of leather and hair and bronze that used to be 36 inches of pride. She'd counted. Of course she'd counted. Just like she'd counted the 2 years, 8 months, and 23 days since they'd cut it. Just like she'd counted the 39 steps from the main road to this exact spot. Just like she'd counted the number of times she'd told herself this would be the last time she came here. 42 times. 43 after today. The crying started the way it always did, not with sound, but with the tightness in her chest that felt like someone was squeezing her lungs with both hands. The burning behind her eyes that she'd learned to ignore during the day, but couldn't fight at night. The way her jaw clenched so hard, her tusks dug into her lower lip until she tasted copper. She'd gotten good at crying without making noise. 2 years of practice would do that. You learn to cry the way prey animals learn to die quietly, because making noise only brought predators. That's why she didn't hear him approach. Didn't hear the careful footsteps on stone. Didn't hear the slight scrape of leather armor against itself. Didn't hear the almost imperceptible sound of someone trying very hard to move silently while carrying 30 pounds of weapons and gear. What she did hear was the breathing. Human breathing. Slower than orc breathing. Quieter. The kind of breathing you learned in military training, measured, controlled, designed to keep you steady when everything else was chaos. Kara went very still. The kind of still that combat veterans knew the stillness before violence. Her hand moved to her hip, finding nothing. No weapon. She'd stopped carrying weapons 18 months ago after realizing that having a blade only made you think about using it. On enemies. On yourself. Better to have nothing. "I'm not armed," she said in common, her voice rough from disuse and tears. "If you're here to collect a bounty, you'll have to beat me to death with your hands. Might take a while. I'm tougher than I look." The breathing continued, steady, unchanging. Not the breathing of someone preparing to attack. "I'm serious. Kara continued, still not turning around. "There's probably a bounty, 2-year-old bounty from the Iron Jaw clan. 40 gold for proof of death. They wanted to make sure I didn't come back. 40 gold is decent money. You could buy a horse, good armor, maybe a week at a nice inn where they don't ask questions." Silence. Then a voice. Male. Human. With the kind of weariness that told you this person had stopped sleeping, well, a long time ago. "The sword's not for you." Kara finally turned. He stood about 15 feet back, partially shadowed by one of the broken pillars. Tall for a human, not quite her height, but close enough that the difference wouldn't matter in a fight. dark hair graying at the temples, face that had been handsome once before, whatever had happened to put those lines around his eyes and mouth. Leather armor that was well maintained but old, the kind of old that came from being unable to afford new, not from sentimental attachment. The sword in his hand hung loose at his side, not sheathed but not raised either. The position of someone who'd forgotten he was holding it. Their eyes met. There's a thing that happens sometimes when two broken people look at each other. A recognition, not of faces or names or even species, but of damage. You see in someone else the same cracks you carry yourself, and for just a moment, the world gets very quiet and very small and very honest. You were crying, he said. Not a question, not an accusation, just a statement of fact delivered with the careful neutrality of someone who understood that sometimes stating the obvious was kinder than pretending not to notice. I was, Kara said. Your move. Are you going to pretend you didn't see it and walk away? Or are you going to do the human thing and ask me if I'm all right, knowing damn well I'm not, but asking anyway because that's what people do when they don't know what else to say? Something that might have been a smile flickered across his face. Might have been. Hard to tell in the fading light. Neither. I'm going to ask if you mind company. Of all the things Kara had expected, violence, pity, disgust, fear, this wasn't on the list. This wasn't on any list. This was so far off the list that the list couldn't see it with a telescope. You want to? She paused, trying to wrap her mind around the concept. Sit with me, here, in ORC, in the ruins, while I cry. Yes. Why? The human was quiet for a long moment. Then he walked forward slowly, carefully telegraphing every movement the way you did with frightened animals or traumatized people. He sat down on the broken arch about 5 feet from her, close enough to talk, far enough to run, if necessary. He laid the sword beside him, not sheathed but out of hand, a gesture. Because, he said quietly, I came here to do the same thing. And in 2 years of coming to these ruins, I've never seen anyone else, which means we're both either very unlucky or very smart. Either way, he looked out at the broken pillars. Misery loves company, and I'm tired of being alone with mine. Kara stared at him, at this human, this enemy, this impossible, inexplicable person who just said the most honest thing anyone had said to her in 2 years. You cry here too. Every week, sometimes twice a week if it's been bad. How long? 2 years, 6 months, 11 days. Kara felt something crack in her chest. Not breaking, not exactly, more like shifting, like ice starting to thaw after a long winter. 2 years, 8 months, 23 days, she said softly. He nodded, as if this made perfect sense, as if the math of grief was something that could be measured in days and months, and the weight of memories that wouldn't die. They sat in silence for a while. The sun was setting now, painting the ruins in shades of copper and gold that made the old bloodstains look almost beautiful. Almost. I'm Marcus, he said eventually. Kara. Ironjaw clan. Her hand tightened on the broken war braid. Now I'm nothing. No clan, no tribe, no family. Just, she gestured vaguely at herself. This, whatever this is. Marcus reached into his armor, pulling out something small, a piece of metal that caught the dying light. He held it out, an insignia, the kind sergeants wore, the kind you earned through blood and loyalty and years of service, the kind you only removed when you were dead, or when you had removed it yourself. The insignia was cut in half, roughly, violently, the kind of cut you made with a combat knife when you were angry and heartbroken and done. Sergeant of the 3rd Border Regiment, Marcus said quietly. Now I'm nothing. No rank, no unit, no purpose. Just, he mirrored her gesture. This, whatever this is. Kara looked at the broken insignia, at the broken war braid in her lap, at the broken ruins around them, at this broken man sitting 5 feet away. What did you do? She asked. I obeyed orders I shouldn't have obeyed. Then I disobeyed orders I should have obeyed. Then I ran. His voice was flat, empty, the tone of someone who'd told this story to themselves so many times it had lost all meaning. I broke the law of the blood oath, refused to kill a human child who'd been captured during a raid. 7 years old, small, crying for his father. Kara's jaw tightened. The war chief said honor demanded blood. I said honor demanded mercy. The clan disagreed, violently. Marcus turned to look at her fully now. Really look. And in his eyes, Kara saw something she hadn't seen in 2 years. Understanding. Not pity, not sympathy, but the bone-deep understanding that comes from carrying the same weight. They exiled you for saving a child. They exiled me for betraying what it means to be orc, for choosing weakness over strength, for, she touched the broken war braid, for forgetting that humans are the enemy, always, forever, no exceptions. And what do you think now? Kara looked at him, at this human who'd sat down next to an orc, who'd shared his grief like it was something sacred, who'd shown her his broken insignia like it was something precious. I think, she said slowly, that maybe the only thing I betrayed was their idea of what I should be. And maybe that's not betrayal at all. Marcus nodded, then he did something extraordinary. He reached into his pack and pulled out a small water skin and what looked like dried meat wrapped in cloth. I brought food, he said. Was planning to sit here and pretend to eat while actually just staring at nothing for a few hours. But if you're hungry... Kara couldn't remember the last time someone had offered her food. Really offered. Not thrown scraps, not left garbage where she could find it, but offered, like a person to a person. She took the water skin, took the dried meat, and when their hands brushed in the exchange, neither of them flinched. They ate in silence as the sun died and the stars came out. Two exiles in the ruins of a place built by cooperation and destroyed by hate. Two broken people sharing bread in the shadows of a dead dream. When Kara spoke again, her voice was different, lighter. Like maybe crying wasn't the only thing you could do in ruins. You know what's funny? I came here expecting to be alone, to cry by myself like I always do, to maybe not leave, she paused. But now there's you, and I'm thinking about next week, about whether you'll be here, about whether... She stopped, unable to finish. Marcus smiled, a real smile this time, small but genuine. I'll be here, every week, sometimes twice a week if it's bad. Same. They sat together until full dark. When they finally left Marcus heading east toward the human territories, Kara heading west toward the borderlands, where exiles lived in the spaces between worlds, they didn't say goodbye. They said, see you next week. And for the first time in 2 years, 8 months and 23 days, Kara walked away from the ruins feeling something that wasn't pain. It wasn't happiness. Not quite. But it was the absence of complete hopelessness. And sometimes that's enough to survive another week. The weeks turned into months, and the months turned into something neither of them had expected. Rust. Not the kind built in moments. Not the Hollywood version where one dramatic gesture erases years of conditioning and prejudice. But the slow kind, the painful kind, the kind that grew like grass through concrete, persistent, stubborn, refusing to do even when everything said it should. Marcus told her about the orders, about the village, about the women and children who'd been marked as acceptable losses because they'd been sheltering orc scouts, about how he'd watched his men burn houses while people screamed inside, about how he'd told himself it was necessary, about how he'd stopped believing that somewhere around the 14th house, about how he'd finally broken when he'd seen a mother trying to shield her baby with her body, and he'd realized that the enemy looked an awful lot like the people he'd sworn to protect. Kara told him about the blood oath, about orc tradition that said captured enemies must die to honor the warriors who'd captured them, about the 7-year-old boy who'd hidden in a supply cart during a raid, about how he'd cried so hard he couldn't breathe, about how she'd looked at him and seen not an enemy but a terrified child who wanted his father, about how she'd let him escape in the night, about how the clan had discovered the truth, about how the war chief himself had cut her war braid with a ceremonial knife while the entire clan watched, about how Vera, old stubborn Vera, had been the only voice to speak against the exile and how she'd been silenced, about how she'd walked into the wilderness with nothing but the clothes on her back and the broken piece of her war braid that she'd picked up from the dirt. They traded stories like currency, painful memories for painful memories, guilt for guilt, shame for shame, until the weight felt less like drowning and more like carrying something together. On the ninth week, Marcus brought a worn book of poetry, human poetry. He read aloud while Kara listened, and she laughed, actually laughed when he stumbled over the pretentious metaphors. On the 12th week, Kara taught him 3 words in Orcish: strength, honor, home. He pronounced them badly and she corrected him patiently, and when he finally got them right, she felt a strange warmth in her chest. On the 16th week, they fell asleep sitting against the same pillar and woke up at dawn to find that they'd somehow ended up leaning against each other. They didn't mention it, but they didn't move apart quickly either. On the 20th week, Marcus brought something different. Not food or water or books. He brought a person. Kara saw them coming from a distance and immediately stood, her body shifting into defensive posture even without weapons. Old habits. But Marcus raised his hand, the universal gesture for, "Wait, trust me, it's okay." And she forced herself to stay still. The person with Marcus was young, 20, maybe 21, human. Thin in the way young soldiers were thin before war put muscle on them or death took them entirely. He walked like someone who'd learned to follow, and his hand never strayed far from the sword at his hip. "Kara," Marcus said carefully, "this is Jacob. He was in my unit. He's been struggling. I told him about this place, about—" He paused. "About you." Jacob stared at Kara with the kind of wide-eyed fear that she'd seen 1,000 times. The look humans gave orcs. The look that said monster. But underneath the fear was something else. Something desperate. "You really let that kid go?" Jacob asked, his voice cracking slightly. "The one from the blood oath." Kara nodded slowly. "Wife, because he was 7 years old and terrified and crying for his father. Because I'd been 7 years old and terrified once. Because—" She paused. "Because some things matter more than tradition, more than honor, more than—" She touched the broken war braid at her belt. "More than belonging." Jacob's face crumpled. He made a sound that was half sob, half gasp. "I killed someone," he whispered. "In the village. Marcus's village. The one we burned. I killed. She was defending her home. She had a kitchen, I had a sword. She was 30, maybe 40. And I—" He couldn't continue. Marcus put a hand on the young man's shoulder, firm, steady. "Jacob's been carrying that for 2 years," Marcus said quietly. "Just like we've been carrying ours. I thought maybe knowing he wasn't alone might help." Kara looked at this boy because that's what he was, really just a boy who'd been forced to do things that broke him, and felt something shift in her chest. This was why Marcus had told him. Not to gather allies, not to build an army, but because misery might love company, but healing required it. "Sit," Kara said, gesturing to the stones. "We don't have solutions here. We don't have forgiveness. We don't even have answers. But we have," she looked at Marcus, "we have each other. And sometimes that's enough." Jacob sat. They talked until dark. And when he left, he walked differently. Not fixed, not healed, but less alone. The next week, Marcus brought someone else, a woman, 38 years old, hard as stone, covered in scars that she counted out loud when she was nervous, a habit that would have been funny if it wasn't so sad. Ex-lieutenant, now mercenary, now something else. 29 scars, she said, looking at Kara with eyes that had seen too much. 29 fights. 29 times I should have died. And you know what the worst part is? I don't regret the fighting. I regret who I fought for. Kara understood that. God, did she understand that. The week after that, Jacob brought someone, a young woman from his village. Then the lieutenant brought a former soldier. Then that soldier brought his sister, the ruins of Stonebridge, abandoned for 4 centuries, slowly filled with voices. Not an army, not a resistance, just people. Humans and orcs who'd been broken by the same system that told them they were enemies, who'd committed acts they couldn't forgive, who carried guilt that wouldn't die. They came to share their stories, to cry, to rage, to sit in silence, to not be alone. By the 8th month, there were 15 of them. By the 11th month, 28. Not all orc and human, some were just orc. Exiles like Kara, some were just human, deserters like Marcus. But all of them were people who'd chosen mercy over hate and been destroyed for it. That's when the lieutenant, her name was Sarah, asked the question that changed everything. What are we doing here? They were sitting in a rough circle on the broken bridge, passing food and water, like it was communion. The sun was setting, painting everything in copper and gold. What do you mean? Marcus asked. I mean, we sit, we talk, we share. That's good, that's important, but Sarah gestured at the group, at the orcs and humans sitting together in defiance of everything their worlds told them. We could be more than this. More how Kara's voice was careful. She knew where this could go. Revolution, rebellion, all the ways that good intentions turned into bloodbaths. Not violence, Sarah said quickly, reading her tone. I've had enough violence for 3 lifetimes, but she pulled out a map, spreading it on the stone. Here, the borderlands, between your territory and ours. Unclaimed, unwanted, empty. It's empty for a reason, one of the orcs said. No resources, bad land, nothing grows there. Nothing grows there now, Sarah corrected. But what if it did? What if, what if we built something? Not an army, not a fort, but a... She struggled for words. A home, Kara said softly. Everyone turned to look at her. She stood walking to the edge of the broken bridge, looking out at the ruins, at this place built by cooperation and destroyed by hate. They tried it once, she said. This bridge, built together, and it failed. It lasted 38 years, Marcus said quietly. That's 38 years of people crossing, trading, talking, living. Maybe it failed in the end, but he stood beside her. Maybe that's 38 years longer than hate would have lasted. Kara looked at him, at this human who'd become what friend felt insufficient. Allie felt cold. Family felt impossible. If we do this, she said slowly, if we try to build something in the borderlands, they'll come for us. Both sides, orc and human. They'll see it as betrayal. They'll do exactly what they did to us already, Marcus finished. Exile us, hunt us, destroy us. Except now we'll be together. Now we'll have each other. Sarah stood too, then Jacob, then the others one by one until 28 people stood in a circle on the ruins of a dead dream. I vote we try, Sarah said. 30 scars. Might as well earn a few more for something worth fighting for. One by one they voted, not unanimous. Some were too afraid, some too broken. Some just wanted to keep coming to the ruins to cry, and that was okay too. But 22 of them said yes. 22 people who decided that maybe the answer to being destroyed by hate was to build something with love. The first 4 months were hell. The borderlands were called borderlands for a reason too harsh for humans, too barren for orcs, too dangerous for anyone with sense. The soil was rocky and mineral poor. Water had to be carried from a stream 4 miles away. The wind blew constantly, carrying dust that got into everything, but they worked. Marcus organized the humans using military discipline to create structure without hierarchy. Kara organized the orcs using clan knowledge to build efficiently with limited resources. Sarah scouted the perimeter, her 29 scars earning her a 30th when she drove off a pack of wild dogs. They built shelters first, then a well, then a storage pit, then a communal fire pit where they gathered each night to share what little food they had and remember why they were doing this. Not everyone stayed. 4 left in the first month, unable to handle the hardship. 2 more left when winter came and the cold bit through their inadequate shelters like knives. But 8 more came, then 5 more, then 6. Word was spreading, in whispers, in rumors, about the place between worlds where exiles went, where orcs and humans worked side by side, where the only law was don't be what destroyed you. By the end of the first year, there were 39 of them. By the end of the second year, 62. And that's when the trouble came. Not as an army, not as a war, but as 4 riders on the horizon. Kara saw them first. She'd been reinforcing the well when she spotted the movement. Her blood went cold when she recognized the banners. Ironjaw clan. She ran to find Marcus, who was helping repair a shelter roof. One look at her face told him everything he needed to know. How many? 4. Emissaries probably, not warriors. Your clan, yes. Marcus climbed down from the roof, dusting off his hands. Then we meet them together. They gathered the others. Not everyone, some were out foraging, some were too young to risk, but enough. 14 people, half orc and half human, standing in a line as the riders approached. The lead rider was female, old. Her tusks were yellowed with age, her skin crisscrossed with scars that told stories of 100 battles. She wore the formal armor of a clan elder. Kara's heart stopped. Vera. The old orc dismounted slowly, painfully. Arthritis, Kara realized. The years hadn't been kind, but Vera's eyes were sharp as ever. They swept across the gathered group, taking in the mixed crowd, the crude buildings, the impossible collaboration. Then she looked at Kara. "Well," Vera said in Orcish, her voice like gravel, "you've been busy." Kara stepped forward, her hand instinctively touching the broken war braid at her belt. "Elder Vera, if you've come to demand I return for execution, you should know I won't go quietly." Vera laughed, actually laughed, a sound like stones grinding together. "Child, I'm 68 years old. If I wanted you executed, I'd send warriors. Not myself and 3 younglings barely old enough to grow tusks." She gestured at the other 3 riders who looked terrified. "No, I came to see if the rumors were true." "What rumors?" "That Kara the Exiled had built a town in the borderlands. That she'd brought orcs and humans together. That she'd accomplished in 2 years what the builders of Stonebridge took 38 years to achieve." Vera walked forward, ignoring the nervous shuffling of the humans. "I came to see if you'd actually done it. If you'd built what I've been preaching for 40 years. Kara stared. What? Did you think you were the first to question the blood oath, the first to ask why we treat mercy like weakness?" Vera gestured to the broken war braid. "I voted against your exile, not just because I liked you, but because I saw in you the future of our people, the future I tried to build and failed." Marcus moved to stand beside Kara. "You're saying you support what we're doing here?" Vera turned to him, her ancient eyes assessing. "You're the human, the sergeant who burned the village then deserted." "I am." "Good, you should carry that. Use it to be better." She looked back at the settlement, at the mixed crowd, at the impossible dream made real. "I don't support what you're doing. Support is passive. I want to join it." Silence. Complete, absolute silence. Then one of the young orcs with Vera spoke up, his voice shaking. "Elder, the clan will exile you too if you—" "The clan already failed to exile me once. They can try again if they like. I'm old. I'm dying. And I'll be damned if I die still serving a system I stopped believing in 40 years ago." Vera pulled something from her pack. A war braid. Long, ancient, bronze and hair and leather woven together over decades. She cut it with her knife. One swift movement. The sound of that cut echoed like thunder. Vera let half the braid fall to the ground. The other half she held up. "I'm done with them," she said simply. "If you'll have me, I'm yours." Kara felt tears streaming down her face. She hadn't even realized she was crying. "We don't turn away exiles," she said. "This is a place for people who chose better." Vera smiled, then did something that made Kara's heart stop. She bowed. A clan elder, bowing to an exile. "Then let me stay. Let me help build what I failed to build before. Let me die doing something that matters." The settlement that had started with 22 became 66, then 94, then 153. Word spread faster now, not just whispers, but stories about the place between worlds, about Kara the exiled and Marcus the deserter, about the town they'd built with broken people. Some humans called it treason, some orcs called it heresy, but more and more people called it home. They named it Stonebridge Crossing, a deliberate echo of the bridge that failed, a reminder that failure was just the first attempt at success. By the 3rd year, they had crops. By the 4th, livestock. By the 5th, they had children, both orc and human, growing up together in ways their parents never could have imagined. Not perfect, never perfect. There were fights, disagreements, moments when old prejudices surfaced and had to be fought down. Times when someone left because they couldn't handle the weight of being different. But they kept building. And on every anniversary, Kara and Marcus would walk back to the original ruins, to the broken bridge where they'd first met, where 2 broken people had shared bread and found something neither expected: hope. On the 6th anniversary, they sat on the same stones, older now, tired, but alive. "Do you ever regret it?" Marcus asked. "Staying that night, not running when you had the chance. Kara looked at him, at this human who'd become her partner in building impossible things, her friend, her every day, she said honestly. I regret that it had to happen this way, that we had to be broken before we could build, that we lost so much before we found this. She touched the broken war braid now worn smooth from years of handling. But I don't regret you. I don't regret them. I don't regret choosing this. Marcus nodded. Same. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over ruins that meant something different now. Not just a reminder of failure, but a foundation for trying again. You know what's funny, Kara said eventually. When I came here 6 years ago, I came to die. I thought I'd lost everything, that I had nothing left worth living for. And now I come here to remember how to live. Marcus smiled, that same small, genuine smile from years ago. Same. They sat together until dark. Then they walked back to Stonebridge Crossing, where 153 people waited, where buildings stood that shouldn't exist, where orcs and humans shared meals and stories in the messy work of building something better. As they walked, Kara noticed something. Marcus was limping slightly, an old war wound acting up. Without thinking, she slowed her pace to match his. Without thinking, he reached out when she stumbled on a rock. Without thinking, they'd become people who caught each other when they fell. That night, as the settlement gathered around the communal fire, someone asked Vera to tell a story. The old orc was dying, everyone could see it, but she still had stories left. Once, Vera began, her voice carrying across the firelight. There was a bridge built by enemies who decided to be builders instead. It stood for 38 years before hate destroyed it. But what the history books don't tell you is this: in those 38 years, 617 children crossed that bridge safely to school. 3,942 people crossed it to visit loved ones. 17 couples met on that bridge and fell in love. She looked around at the gathered crowd, at orcs and humans sitting together, at children of both species playing in the firelight. The bridge failed, but for 38 years it succeeded, and success is counted not in years but in lives touched. She paused. We are building a new bridge, not of stone this time, but of people, and it will fail too someday. Everything does, but while it stands, she smiled, count the lives. That's how you measure if something mattered. Vera died 2 weeks later. They buried her in the borderlands with her broken war braid and a stone marker that read, "She chose better." At her funeral, 39 people spoke, orc and human, young and old, each sharing how she'd changed them. When it was Kara's turn, she stood before the grave and said simply, "You were exiled for standing with me. And in the end, you built more by leaving than you ever could have built by staying. Thank you for showing me that broken things can still be foundations, but better ones." The settlement continued. Years passed. Kara and Marcus grew old together, not romantically, but in the way two people grow old when they've built something that matters more than themselves. Their hair went gray, their bodies slowed, but their hands stayed steady. On Kara's 50th birthday, the settlement held a celebration. 206 people now. 3 generations, children who'd never known a world where orcs and humans were enemies. That night, Marcus found Kara sitting alone on the edge of the settlement, looking out at the borderlands. "Hiding from your own party?" he asked, sitting beside her with a groan. His knees didn't work like they used to. "Thinking," Kara said, "about the kid." "Which kid?" "The one from the blood oath, the 7-year-old, the one who started all this." She touched the broken war braid, now little more than a worn strip of leather. "I wonder what happened to him. If he's alive. If he remembers the orc who let him go. Does it matter? I don't know. I saved one life, one, and it cost me everything. My clan, my identity, my..." She gestured vaguely. "Everything I thought I was." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he pointed at the settlement, at the lights, at the sounds of laughter and music drifting on the wind. "You saved one life. That one life didn't start a war, didn't demand vengeance. Went home. Maybe told the people that not all orcs are monsters. Maybe that changed one person's mind. Maybe that one person changed another's. And maybe, just maybe, one of those people ended up here because they'd heard a story about an orc who showed mercy." He looked at her. "You saved one life, but you changed hundreds." That's not a bad trade. Kara felt the tears come. She didn't fight them anymore, hadn't fought them in years. I miss my clan, she admitted. I miss knowing who I was. I miss the simplicity of enemies and allies and clear lines. I miss... She couldn't finish. I know, Marcus said softly. I miss my rank, my purpose, the certainty of orders. But, he gestured at the settlement, I look at this and I think maybe certainty is overrated. Maybe the best things are built in doubt, by people who aren't sure they're right but choose love anyway. They sat in comfortable silence until Kara spoke again. When I die, I want to be buried next to Vera, with my broken war braid, and a marker that says, she paused. I'm not sure what it should say. How about she chose people over pride and built a home from exile? Kara smiled through her tears. That's perfect. Marcus pulled out his broken insignia still carried after all these years. When I die, bury this with me, and let the marker say, he learned that desertion can be devotion, and that those who choose love are braver than those who choose hate. Deal. They shook on it. Two old people making promises about their deaths while surrounded by the evidence of their lives. That night, Kara returned to the party. She danced badly because orcs weren't built for dancing, and age made everything worse. She laughed. She held the children and told them stories. And when she finally fell asleep, it was with the broken war braid clutched in one hand and a smile on her face. Not because everything was perfect, but because imperfect was enough. Years later, when historians would write about Stonebridge Crossing, they'd argue about the details. About whether it was rebellion or revolution. About whether it succeeded or failed. About whether it mattered in the grand sweep of history. But the people who lived there, the ones who built it with broken pieces of themselves, they didn't care about history's judgment. They cared that for one beautiful moment, two species who'd been taught to hate had chosen to build instead. They cared that children grew up knowing kindness before prejudice. They cared that every person who came broken left a little more whole. And they cared that in the ruins of a bridge built by cooperation and destroyed by hate, two people had sat down together and decided that maybe, just maybe, the third time would be the charm. The bridge failed once. The settlement would fail too, eventually. Everything did. But while it stood, 617 children crossed it safely. 3,942 people crossed it to visit loved ones. And two broken people became the foundation for something that shouldn't have been possible. That's how you measure if something mattered. Not in the years it lasted, but in the lives it touched. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is sit down with your enemy and realize they're just as broken as you are. Sometimes exile isn't the end of your story, it's the beginning of a better one. Sometimes choosing mercy over hate costs you everything. And sometimes that's exactly the price worth paying. Because in the end, blood makes you orc, fear makes you human, but love makes you family.